Welcome to the Lighting Fires podcast. It is a Monday morning. It's about to become a heat wave here in the UK, and England have just won a very important football match overnight. So everybody seems to be feeling good today. I've been listening back to this episode where I introduced you to Sophie Greenaway. It's the story of a woman becoming an accidental head teacher. It's a story of self-acceptance and learning to take over a leadership role from somebody else who's done a great job, and the exploration of what it means to be a leader. What if no one has ever seen a leader like you before? So this is about being good enough, about growing in confidence, growing in self-acceptance, learning to slow down in a fast-moving environment, and finding ways to enable others to think for themselves. We also talk about handling conflict, some brilliant tips and tricks in here. And we also talk about later life ADHD diagnosis. So this is jam-packed with essential advice. Whether you're an aspiring leader, whether you are an existing leader, I think a lot of this will resonate. I'd say it's essential advice for head teachers. Sophie has a lot to offer, so I'll let you sit back and enjoy. And if you do decide you'd like to talk to me about coaching, please get in touch. julie@lightingfires.co.uk. Welcome to the Lighting Fires podcast. Today I have Sophie Greenaway with me. Sophie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sophie Greenaway and I am a head teacher at a primary school in Caversham. And I'm also a mum of 3 boys, which keeps me very, very busy as well. And yeah, it's great to be here today. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. So Sophie, tell us a bit about your backstory, please.
So my backstory related to, teaching, I suppose I'll start with, is that I always wanted to teach. Lots of teachers in my family, and I have taught in many schools in my career and in lots of different places as well. I even taught in my own primary school down in Cornwall. And I found myself in Reading, and I think that's because I have had some family here, even though I'm from Cornwall. So I'm quite a long way from home. But I felt very attached to the community here in Reading because of my links to coming up here as a child. Everyone else gets to go down to Cornwall during the holidays. I came up to Reading. So strong attached to the community, and I found myself working in Caversham Primary School in Reading as my first school, Reading school to work in. And I was on maternity leave with my second son, and I was incredibly happy there. Loved that school, still love that school. Told you I was on maternity leave. I went to look round the school I'm in now, and it just had a really strong family vibe, and that's what I needed at the time as well. If I was going to leave somewhere that I loved, I had to be going into somewhere that I felt that belonging to. And so I became a deputy head when I had my second son as well, and I worked incredibly hard to get to understand that school, because every school, even though you're in the same community, every school is different. So I worked incredibly hard to get to know that school community and embed myself there. And I know maybe you won't like this, Julie, but I call myself an accidental head teacher because then the head that I worked with very strongly, she retired early, and I was asked to take on the position of acting head, and then had to really strongly think about whether to go for the headship. And from the support of the community, or actually of the head teacher from my previous school as well, helped me know that actually I could go for that headship. So I did, and I ended up being head of that school and actually working with families like your children. And I've sort of not looked back since. I've been at that school as the head teacher ever since then.
Yeah, thank you. So I remember you becoming assistant head because, as you say, my children went to the school where you are head. And I remember seeing you, and I just observed you, like, growing in confidence and finding your style over time to a point where you just seemed so comfortable and so in your own kind of approach, and it was amazing just to watch that. Actually,
it's kind of a blessing and a curse to take over the role of head when you're in the school already. Everyone already knows you and you already know them, which is which is great, and that's an easy transition. But stepping into someone else's shoes who you deeply admire, who did a brilliant job, everyone compares you to them. And I think, I mean, I don't know quite where the imposter syndrome that I have has come from, but it's very deeply rooted in me. And, you know, people do struggle with change. They absolutely do. I was struggling with that change. I couldn't be her because I'm not her. I'm not the previous head, I'm myself. But we have the same value system. And I think if you've got the same value system as somebody that you're taking over that headship from, that is a great starting point. And I think that what did really help me is that you came forward as well and offered me some coaching and some support in that way. I'd never had coaching before. I've had different kind of therapies in my life and talking to people, and I'm good at talking.
Yes,
I can talk in any situation all the time. But I suppose I'd never considered it, that it's good to talk in your career as well. And that actually that was exactly what I needed, because I needed to know through talking to somebody that I could be me, and that was okay to grow, like you say, grow in that confidence of being you in that role and not having to be someone else. Being you in that situation is okay, and then you taking the school onwards with your own ideas and growing it in that way from the deep-rooted foundations and great values that were embedded in me from the previous head, taking it onwards, that's okay, and that worked well.
Yeah. I think you've just really hit the nail on the head of what comes up so often in these interviews for me, and I see it every day in my work. Coaching just helps people realise that it's okay to be you. And often I hear people worry that they're not good enough or their style isn't right. Like this whole idea of, well, I'm not like other leaders. And it's really limiting. It keeps people small and anxious, when actually, as soon as they realise that it's absolutely brilliant to be you, then suddenly it's like so liberating. It's amazing. I feel quite emotional saying that, because I love that moment when the penny drops and people are like, oh, okay, so being me is exactly what this organisation or this school or this company needs.
Yeah, and I absolutely, the first person who said it to me before you was actually my previous head teacher from Thameside Primary School, Ruth. I went to see her and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to go for the job. And I actually cried in her office, and it was, I can't be, I actually said to, it makes me feel a bit emotional. I was like, I can't be Sophie. That's who I can't be, because that wouldn't be right. I'm not a leader, I'm Sophie. And how will I do what I saw the previous person do? Or how will I do what everyone says you should do out there to be a good leader? You know, you do your MPQH as a head, you know, the qualification you could do. I was doing that. And you have talks from people and you're told about leadership styles and what you have to do. And actually, if you don't quite fit into the mould of those types and those ways you're told to be a leader, you do feel even more that you can't then go and be you. But maybe no one's ever seen a leader like you before, and that's okay. And I think working with you, it was like, you know, I decided to go for the job and then started working with you, and it just made me feel even more so that I could put my ideas into action, that what I'm saying and doing is the right thing to do. It's just different, and that is okay.
So when we started working together, we were in the middle of lockdown, weren't we?
Yeah.
And I remember, for me personally, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I think my coaching business is probably going to end up closing down, because I had a purely face-to-face, in-person business model at the time. I was starting to lose a little bit of who I was, because I was about to become a kind of homeschooling mum, and that was not my intention in life. And I love my work and I know the difference that it makes. And I started to think, I wonder what I can offer people that would be useful at this time. So I contacted you, I contacted a couple of other people. One was the NHS and one was a commercial client. And I just decided, okay, I'm just going to offer stuff at no cost or really low cost so that I get to keep my hand in. I know I'm doing something useful that's contributing, and maybe it'll help. So I approached you, and I guess there's a kind of slightly ethical question about, should I be coaching the head teacher of my children?
We spoke about that.
We did speak about that, and we decided that it would be okay and we could keep it really separate. And you felt that it would be useful for you. So that's a bit of the context of how we came to this, really, isn't it?
And added into that, I suppose, because when I first became head, it was a bit of a baptism of fire for me. I became head in January 2019. November 2019, I had an Ofsted.
Okay.
And then obviously 2020, then the following year we went into lockdown.
Yeah.
So for me, having someone to talk through that situation and the conversations we had felt warm and useful, and I just felt accepted. And I think that for me is what I needed at that time, is a connection. But it was highly important at that time to have a continual connection with somebody. And really importantly, and I know you're connected to the school as well, but having somebody that could be impartial, and you did a great job of that. You knew your children at our school, but you still, it was that impartial person that I could speak to, and I felt that I could be completely honest with you and tell you how I was feeling without judgment.
Well, thank you for saying that. If you're listening to this and you're interested in training as a coach, I can highly recommend the Professional Certificate in Executive Coaching, or even the Masters at Henley Business School. It is the best investment I have made in myself and my business. The course is led by research, so you know it has academic rigour, and the tools and techniques you learn are highly practical. You get the opportunities to practice, you build confidence. I also gained friendships for life, a community that's continued to support me. I can highly recommend it. So if you decide to take the plunge and contact Henley, do mention the Lighting Fires podcast. So the topics that you brought to coaching, so you've touched on imposter syndrome, we can talk about that a bit more. Was there anything more that you were hoping to get out of the coaching?
I think it was feeling good enough. For me, it was a huge thing, but that it's entwined with confidence. I needed to feel more confident, because there's no real transition to becoming a head. You know, the head leaves, you're the head. The line stops with you the minute they walk out the door. And, you know, it does. And you're there, and everything comes to you. And you have to learn very quickly. And I think you do make a lot of mistakes. And for somebody with low self-esteem to feel on a daily basis that everything's your fault, and that everything you're doing or trying to do with the best intentions, and I'm a real doer and an actioner. And I think what I also needed to do was learn to slow down a bit in my thought process, and by talking things through with you, that also offered me that space to think things through better, because I feel like I had to fix things quickly. It felt like everyone wanted me to do that for them, but actually, did they? And was I helping people by fixing things quickly, by them not thinking things through? Okay. And I think that's also what you helped me realise.
Yeah, that was interesting. I remember you coming to the beginning of the coaching saying that you need to empower the people to be able to make decisions and take responsibility.
Yeah. I think when you've got any sort of managerial position in any company or any business or any educational setting, I think people tend to come to you for the answers, and they do want it solved quickly, because everyone's so busy. There's lots of things to constantly be doing. And so people feel they need an answer quickly. And what you can take away from them is their own thinking. Interestingly, motto at the school before I worked there was think for yourself. Oh. And behind a sticker in the car park, there's still a faint remnants of that of the school motto. That is a really thing that I still think about when I pull up in the car park. I know it's behind that sticker. So deep down, it's like what I was taking away. I knew it's not, they weren't thinking for themselves, but I felt like they needed me to fix it. And I think I'm now thinking, no, I can talk to you, and I can, it's a bit like, I mean, it's what you do for me.
Really the same, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It's kind of thinking, I can't fix it for you because you're not going to learn and grow. And if you told me I'm sure when I spoke to you that you were like, oh, that's what she should do, that's what she could do. You would probably have fixing ideas. You never told me what to do. It was through the conversations that I realised what I needed to go back and do. And that's what you need to do for other people.
But I think we're raised, and we have it constantly reinforced to us, that we take a problem to somebody else, they tell us how to fix it. I just don't think culturally or in our education system typically we are encouraged to think for ourselves and to know that our own thoughts about what needs to happen need to be explored and are probably the right things. Yeah, I feel like if we could get more of a coaching culture going on in our society, that would really help.
And I think that the problem I see with it and why it isn't more fully embedded is time. I think, that's something that I really struggle with. My boys at home, my 3 boys, they see me prioritise them and prioritise work. And there's no time for anything else. And I think that's another thing, actually, linking into what you helped me do. I don't think there's a work-life balance. I don't think that exists, because you do spend most of your time at work. But what you need to do is consider how much you're working and when to stop. Because I remember talking to you about how many hours I was working. And when I first started as head teacher, I would be up at 5. I would get to work by about 5:45, and then I would be at work. I'd stay as late as I possibly could, and then I would get home. I'd spend a little bit of time with the children, not enough, very honest about that, and then I would start working again. And I'd work till about 1:30 in the morning, and I did that for a long time, and it's not healthy. And I know that now. And if I could give any advice to anyone going into headship, is you don't need to do that. You don't need to get all of the policies sorted straight away. You can't fix everything straight away. You've got to give yourself time and space in the role. And that's what the time and space talking to you helped me slow that down a bit. But I thought I had to do it for the school because I'm a workaholic. I know I am, and I escape into my work, and I love work. I do love work. I love it. I wouldn't do it otherwise. But that's not the right way to function, and it can be hugely detrimental to your family. And sadly, I don't think that wasn't the main reason or anything like that, but it was definitely a contributing factor to then later my marriage ending. But I look back at how I went into headship, and you can't put the job ahead of your family, and I think I did. I absolutely did, being honest. And there's some points now even where I do put doing tasks and task completion ahead of my family. And so I have your voice in the back of my head thinking about making myself question, am I doing the right thing with doing that?
And I hear this a lot with people who work in charitable organisations or vocational type roles like yours, where you're so passionate about what you do, but you could stay up 24 hours a day and you'd never get everything done, would you? And so it is about, as you say, like noticing your work patterns, prioritising, allowing yourself a bit of time, being a bit patient. It's hard, though, to do.
It is really hard. And I think particularly working in a school, when you're ahead, you're accessible. You can let yourself not to be accessible, but things never stop. Emails never stop coming in. And there's always something to do. Like you say, it's coming to the understanding, like, the job is never done, and it never will be. It never can be. You've never done everything. There's no end point. And you've got to realise that, because otherwise, like you say, I could easily work 24 hours a day. I can hyper-focus and I can just work. But I will never, ever complete the job. And then what will I have missed in my life that's also important?
Yeah.
And I what I really don't want is my boys to remember me, when I'm not here and go, well, mum worked all the time. Because I love my job. I want them to be proud of what I've accomplished, and I want people to remember me positively in the communities and in any school I've worked in, and across my rest of my life, my friends, my hockey team, everything. I want people to remember me positively, but not just for working. But I need to shift that a bit more. I managed to work with you and consider it, and I stopped doing those long hours from working with you, which was important. But it's still making those working patterns better is something I'm still working on. But being aware of it makes you better.
Yes.
Anyway, you've got to have that awareness.
Yeah, so I was talking to a coaching friend yesterday, and we're both reflecting on what is our definition of success in life right now. Because, I'm 51, she's 55, like she's like you, she's just so energetic, got limitless energy. She's just finished her doctorate, she does a lot of fell running, she's super fit. But we both have put so much energy into our work, and we're both starting to kind of lift our heads a bit and think, well, what else do we want to have our energy for? What else is there in life? Success is not necessarily, the business and the money that comes in. There's a lot more to it than that, isn't there?
So when I was a little girl, I had the 3 jobs I wanted to do. And it was, I was going to be a teacher, a lawyer, a doctor. But more than anything in the world, my whole life, I've just wanted to be a mum and have children.
Wow.
That
really?
is, so when you say about what does success mean to you, I'm a mum, and I'm like, that is the most important thing. That makes me well up more than anything, because I've always wanted children. And I think that's why also I love teaching, because I get to work around children. They're quirky, they're eccentric, and they're fun. And I get on really well with children. The energy levels, I feel old, a lot older, I'm 45. A child asked me yesterday, how old are you, Mrs. Greenaway? And I was like, do I tell them? I was like, 45. And she looked a bit puzzled in a good way. But they keep my energy. I have too much energy, and they absorb some of that because they've got so much energy and they've got capability to absorb some of mine as well. So I think that's another reason I was drawn to work with children. But I always wanted my own. Absolutely. So I think for me, success is that I've had my children. Okay. That's, for me, the best achievement that I could possibly have. Yeah. I'm really proud of where I have come in my career. But like I said earlier, I think I do feel an accidental head. But the way I feel I've got here is because I just worked really hard. Ever since I can remember at school myself, I worked hard. You give me something, I want to do the best. And I suppose there's a perfectionism in my personality that sort of drives that as well. I want to do well with whatever I'm given. But success for me is centred around family, which is where I'm conflicting, and always have been conflicting in the amount of time that I put into my work and thinking about how I put more energy into my family as well. And I think we spoke about this actually at the time. The thing I put least energy into is myself and self-care. That doesn't really exist. My money, my time, my energy goes into my children when I'm at home, when I'm with them. And very little, apart from my parents were like, you must play hockey, it's really good for you. So I've managed to keep that going.
That's good.
And that's really good for me. That's escapism.
Yeah, but I remember you saying that kind of takes you out of your head and helps switch everything off. So it's so healthy, isn't it? But it's interesting listening to you talk about always wanting children, because I've seen you around your kids and you're so present and you're so brilliant with them. I never wanted children.
Really?
Never wanted children.
I didn't know that.
I remember being in my kind of corporate life, and colleagues would go off on maternity leave and bring their babies in, and I would just completely ignore the babies. I would be the one I'd like, oh hi, and then I'd carry on tapping away on my computer. And it wasn't that I didn't intentionally want to be unkind. I just genuinely had no interest whatsoever. Yeah. And then when I met my husband, we used to joke, because he said, well, this is never going to work because you're allergic to children, Julie. And he really, really wanted children. Oh. And, I came around to the idea, obviously, and I love being a mum. And I find it quite challenging, the balance between the time that goes into work and the time goes into the family life, and also knowing that ultimately you want to raise really independent young people too.
Yeah.
So, that balance between wanting to kind of mother them and let go. But I'm digressing. Right, so let's talk about the coaching. So why don't we talk a bit about the conflict piece?
Mm-hmm.
So what were you specifically struggling with, and what was useful?
So linking back to what I said about I feel everything's my fault, which is part of my DNA and the way I am. And I accept that. And I think that's quite refreshing now that I do accept that. So I know that I think like that. When I first started being a head teacher, I didn't accept that about myself. I considered that everything was my fault. So anything that went wrong, anything, even little, I would think it's my fault. But it's thinking of my response to stress, anxiety, fear, I suppose, in a way. It's all linked together, isn't it? Fear that I can't fix something, I suppose, or not knowing what to do, or doing the right thing and being judged. There's all those things that go on in your head, and negative self-talk. But it's an odd sensation for me, because my brain would be racing, wanting to fix it. Because if you think something's your fault, you want to fix it, because then you'll feel better. That's what you think anyway. And my body would literally shake. So I do get really cold quite a lot of the time, because I've got Raynaud's and however you pronounce it. And I was distinctly aware that I was shaking, and I would start shaking, even to the point where my teeth would chatter, because I think, is it adrenaline that was flooding in my body? Or there's obviously something filling my body, and I wasn't able to cope with what was happening. And so that, for me, I remember talking to you about that, and I was finding that really hard to manage, particularly because I was a new head, and every situation was new, or felt some situations felt confrontational. And then it was, you helped me think about what I could do in those situations, and what I could do, I suppose, internally to help me not think, right, this is my fault, and actually you need to listen in those situations, because actually you can miss things, and actually you start panicking, your head's panicking, but because you're a bit frozen and shaking and shivering with adrenaline, you can miss what's being said around you, and then maybe you do not deal with it in the best way. So it was about bringing that calm to me, and that was what we spoke. I remember speaking a lot about it, about what I could do differently in those situations.
So can you remember what you specifically did to calm yourself, or the different self-talk that you were doing?
It was about, I think it was one of the things which I did just mention, but it's about listening to what they're saying and focus on that. Because if you're focusing on that, you're less focusing on what's negatively going around in your head, and that will help. What they need you to listen. Quite often, if there's any situation like that, people just need to talk. And do you know what? They don't necessarily need you to fix it, particularly when it comes to other staff or my friends or family. So I needed you to point that out to me. Just listen to people, and then be curious, ask questions. And, because you've listened well, you ask the questions that they need to get, what do they need? And what would an ideal solution be to them? Ask them that, not you think you've got to tell them what it should be, because that can make people even crosser, because you might say things that they don't want to hear. And so I think that was really, really helpful to me. And the more I practiced it takes practice. It's like anything to get better at it.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether I advised it. You probably came up with that idea yourself, because, 20 minutes ago during this interview, we were talking about how important it is that we enable other people to think and to just listen to them. But I remember years ago, I was leading a culture change programme in a county council, and we were talking about confrontation, because people were working on planning applications during lockdown, again around the same time we were working together, and they would get a lot of very angry members of the public calling them up saying, where's my planning application got to? I need to build this thing. Really stressful. And one person said something that was so useful. He said, well, I've realised that actually people's expectations are quite low, and if you listen to them and just ask them some questions and then ask, what can I do to help, it's usually something very small. It's not this enormous life-changing thing that I think we all think we've got to be able to offer. So it kind of really reflects what you've just said.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that. It's like, you know, in some situations, maybe an apology is what someone wants to hear. You know, it might be from me, because you do have to be the person that apologises on behalf of the corporation or the company or the school or whatever it is. That is one of your roles. You know, you do accept responsibility, and that's kind of what you take on when you take the role on. But sometimes they just want to know that that's not right, what happened. You'll reflect on your, you know, how you work next time on it. You'll reflect on your processes or your policy on things. And sometimes that's all people want. Or they do, like you say, come up with very simple things. And it's revolutionary, actually, to people that you can't be the fixer. I can't remember who said it, but someone was like, you're the head teacher, it's teaching. And I miss being in the classroom because I felt good being a teacher. I know we spoke about that. It's like my confidence levels of being in the classroom with the children was sky high. I felt good at doing that, and I knew I could do it. And I suppose it's applying, like, you're still a teacher, but you're bringing on adults. It's kind of like your big classroom. You're bringing on adults all together and working as a bigger classroom together. So it's thinking I am still getting to be a teacher, and I'm helping people come on and develop, but not by fixing things for them. That's not what you do. Because if you correct a child's work, for example, for them, they're not learning to know how to do it differently next time. It's the same in the classroom. Yeah. So it's kind of like learning to apply the principles of being a good teacher in the classroom to being with adults. Managing adults can be really daunting. It feels very different. But I think if you studied as a teacher and that was your, you know, career before you manage adults, then you can apply lots of things. It's people, it's communication. You've got to have good relationships.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of not just teaching adults in the school. You're having a huge influence on the parents, on the community. You know, that's the daily impact that you're having. When you're stood at the school gate and you're greeting people, you are role modelling and you are creating a sense of community just in that 10 minutes you're there, and how you interact with people. So it's a far-reaching role. Yeah,
and I think that's the exciting part of it, is that you can be, like you say, more far-reaching and your impact can be greater. And I think if you lead a school, you can bring your personality, your ethos, your deep-rooted values, you can bring it in a much bigger, more impactful way than just working in one classroom within that school. And that's the exciting thing.
That's really exciting. I feel excited just listening to you talk about that. Are you a business leader looking to grow performance, or a coach looking for a system your clients will value? If so, Insights Discovery might be for you. If you're a regular listener to the Lighting Fires podcast, you'll know how powerful it can be to understand how people think and make decisions. Insights Discovery is one of the world's most trusted psychometric systems. It's used by 48% of Fortune 500 companies and consistently scores above 97% in accuracy based on user feedback. Insights works because it's practical. It helps people and teams make better decisions and communicate without friction. Experience what's possible when you go from managing people to truly understanding them at www.insights.com. So you talked about the imposter syndrome and the not being good enough. So do you recall moments in the coaching when we worked on that?
Yeah, so that was something that I definitely was really struggling with at the beginning of working together. And it was everything I was doing or saying, I was questioning. And that's really exhausting. I can't express how exhausting it is.
Yeah.
And part of that is because you're in situations you've never experienced before. And you don't want to get things wrong because it's children at the heart of it. There's children that you're working for and around, and they're the heart of everything we do at our school. And I know that's true of every school as well. But you don't want to get it wrong for them. This is their life. This is their beginning of, you know, everything they go on to do and be. So that's the ultimate pressure because they're at the heart of every decision. And so with imposter syndrome, it's kind of like you kind of don't trust yourself at the beginning because you've never done things before. So it's experiences like there were a lot more difficult conversations. And I remember having, you recommended a book to me, which I read, and it was absolutely brilliant about difficult conversations. One of the best things that I took away from that is planning for things. Because I felt less like an imposter if I'd planned and prepared for situations. And then I went into them feeling strength, I suppose, to know that at least I had an idea of where I was going to start, go through, because that had better outcomes. And so I think that enabled me to feel more and more confident as I went into those situations, because giving my time myself to plan for them. Where it works less well is where things are sort of, they come out of nowhere, which again happens all the time, and you have to be more dynamic. But what I have learned, and I feel I've really grown in this as well, is to go, even in those situations, you know, just say, thank you for letting me know. I just need to think about it, and I'll come back to you as soon as possible. I wasn't able to do that at the beginning. I thought, nope, there and then, right, dropping everything I was doing in my head, took on too much cognitive load, absolutely overwhelming. So that makes the imposter syndrome worse, because then you spread yourself too thinly, and it makes you think that you're right to feel you're an imposter.
Okay.
Because you're like, well, I am. Well, I didn't deal with that very well. Because you're trying to do too much. And I think it was stripping back and going, well, no, I've got to be able to say, absolutely, that's important to that person. Know that they feel valued. Know I will do it, but I can't do it there and then. And that's made me better, and that's made situations better. And I think the other thing that I've really tried to do in anything that I've learned in any capacity through coaching and things like that is to share it. I share it with all my staff, and they really appreciate that, and then we sort of grow together, which is also really important. And that helps get rid of the imposter syndrome as well, because we're sort of growing together, and you can see that growth's okay and it's valued, and we're all, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it right now, right? You're sharing all of this with even a wider audience. So I remember talking about that. It was the Fierce Conversations by Susan
that was it.
Scott.
Sorry, I couldn't remember the title.
I absolutely love that book.
Yeah.
I have talked about it quite a lot on the podcast before, because what it does is it gives you this fantastic framework for having these conversations. And I think I remember us talking about it and you saying, the hardest conversations was with the people that I know the least, the parents that I might not have really met before. So I suppose the reason that the easier ones are with people you know is that there's some familiarity in that. You kind of slightly know what you're in for, don't you? And so this framework is increasing that sense of kind of familiarity, because you know now this is how I can handle this. And the book's brilliant, but the framework is so simple. So you state what the issue is to the person and the way that it's making you feel, the effect that the issue is having on somebody. But the crucial next stage is you own up to any role you might have played in this situation.
I'm good at that bit.
I can imagine you'd be very good at that bit. Yes. And what that does is that it immediately calms the other person, because they suddenly realise that they don't need to be on the defensive. It's not all seemingly their fault, and that this is a kind of team effort here. And that you're there to kind of listen and find ways to fix it. And I've worked with lots of clients on this. We quite often in a session will work through a couple of scenarios. I'll even get people to write down what they would like to say. Practicing it is so helpful.
Yeah, so when you first told me about the book, what I did is obviously went away, bought it, read it. I love reading. And I made myself a template.
Okay, yeah.
And that was initial brilliant practice, because I could have, rehearse it in my head about this conversation, fill in the boxes.
Yeah.
And I did that for, I would say, quite a number of years, is doing a template and having that support, especially when earlier years of being ahead. But now it feels integral. Interestingly, as you were talking through those stages, I was thinking of a conversation I had before half term. I was like, yeah, I did all those things integrally. I didn't need that template. And that's that shows my growth. I even rehearse in the car now because I know the integral thing. I will rehearse situations in the car. Sometimes I'll phone my sister. She's a teacher as well. Obviously, I won't tell her any names or things, but I just want to talk it through. And I say, can you pretend you're a different person? And I'm just going to talk to you. And I'll say, what does that sound like to you? And she's given me great tips about, and then I go into situation and it's better. But don't go in and rush it because you can make things a lot worse. That's what I learned. You learn pretty quickly.
That's interesting because we've already talked about, slowing down, haven't we, and not rushing. And I think you're right. Like once you've worked with a framework like that multiple times, you then just adopt it. You don't even have to think about it anymore. You just follow those steps automatically. Yeah. It's really very useful. I use it in my personal, professional life. It's very helpful.
Well, you say that because I remember when you said about it, and I immediately went home and said to my husband, I said, we need to talk about the dishwasher. and and I said, when I come home from work, it does make me feel incredibly sad that there's all the things on the side and the dishwasher's empty and it's not being put in it. And I said, I just need to let you know how it makes me feel when I come in. And I used it straight away.
Well, Sophie, I feel like I've been on the receiving end of that exact conversation about the dishwasher multiple times. I feel like my husband's probably like listening at the door. I'm not going to let him read the book. No. Okay, brilliant. So anything else that came up in the coaching that would be useful to touch on, do you think?
I just think that relates back to what I was saying about having someone to talk to. We had a Headteacher conference last summer, and there was a leadership coach that was talking, and she said, if there's one thing you do as heads, you have got to have a coach. She was basically, it's criminal. You're letting yourself down. You're letting your school down if you don't have somebody to talk things through. And that's what she was recommending to everybody in the room. And I was sitting there thinking, I absolutely know what you mean, because I know some people that are hesitant. Sorry, I make up words. That are, they're really hesitant to have a coach, because number one, it can be an expenditure to the school, and we are all struggling with our budget. And so heads can be like really selfless. They want the money in the school to go on children. And I'm not saying coaching is a phenomenal amount of money by any means. It's not, but they are reluctant to spend that money on themselves. I think a lot of heads don't put that sort of self-care first. But if you want your school to move forward and you want to support your staff, because as I said earlier, everything you learn, you can bring into your team. And actually, it's not just one person that's, getting a positive experience and learning and growing, developing from having coaching. It can be everybody within your school community. So I agree with what she said. I think that if there's any head out there that's not got a coach, really strongly consider it, because it's vital. It is vital to your school, especially, in the education system we're working at the moment, and all the pressures we've got with new Ofsted regimes, things like that, new frameworks, less money, expected to do more. You need someone to talk to that will help you think about the best ways to move your school forward and work within those really tight constraints that are being put around us all. Yeah. So, I mean, that would absolutely be what I would recommend.
I completely agree with you. I think having that neutral space where people they don't have any agenda, they don't know the staff, they don't know. I think it's really useful. Isn't it? So Sophie, I just wanted to mention, because recently we spoke and you shared the fact that you had a later life diagnosis, and I'm wondering what that was like for you, receiving that, but how that kind of helps you interpret now some of the topics that we've talked about today.
Yeah, I think so. In April last year, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and for me, life-changing is a bit of a strong word, but it was very pivotal for me, because everything that we spoke about in coaching and the things that I was struggling with my personality, the way my brain works and my energy levels, everything that was sort of central to our conversations, it's kind of made me reflect on all of that, knowing now the way my brain works and why it works like that. So, it was it was like, okay, this is good, because I was like, before that, I'm being brutally honest, I was considering starting antidepressants. I thought I was very depressed. I thought I was very sad with the way I was and not really understanding why I'm like the way I am. And then it's like, well, maybe I'm just undiagnosed. Maybe there's something there. And for me, it was quite, as I said, a pivotal moment, because I understood myself better. It gave me the understanding of why my brain won't switch off, why I need to move, why my energy levels are so high, why I can be impulsive and speak without thinking. And that puts a new light on what we were speaking about, because maybe there are some things I can't help, but self-awareness makes you be able to help them, if that makes sense. So I will know why I needed the script so much, because then I'm not going to let my thoughts run away with me in that situation. Actually, everything that came out of the coaching worked really well for me as a person with ADHD, without us realising at the time that I had ADHD. But yeah, it's been refreshing for me. I wear a lanyard for work. So now I have little Miss Chatterbox, a little badge on my lanyard. It's my way of saying I've got ADHD without saying it, because I used to feel embarrassed being me, especially around other heads. Like, can I be myself around them? I just want to talk all the time. I find it hard not to. And is that annoying? And will they accept me? And actually, they weren't surprised either. But I didn't need a label. I just needed to understand how my brain works. I'm not depressed. I'm not sad. I'm somebody who just needed to know how their brain worked and why, and then I can do things to support myself moving forwards. And I feel more confident in myself now.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. How would it have been different if we had known about the ADHD during the coaching, do you think?
I don't actually, because you just got to know me and everything we did was right for what I'm like as a person. Okay. But I think it could have helped maybe us both understand where it's coming from. But at the end of the day, it's there anyway. But yeah, I do think it's helped my well-being just personally to know why I am like I am, and then I can feel a bit better about myself and I can accept who I am.
Yeah. I think it is about acceptance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point in the interview, I'm going to offer you one of the questions out of the red envelope. So if you'd like to put your hand in and choose one.
Okay, can you remember a moment when your coach asked you a question, you avoided answering, and which you then came back to because you realised it can be avoided? Ooh, yeah, I do remember. I think it's linked to where that feeling of not feeling good enough's come from.
Yeah.
I find that a really difficult concept to consider, because it opens up for me a lot of questions or potential for blame or things I've done that could have created that. And I think quite often that feeling of not feeling good enough, you could think, oh, it's got to come from somewhere in her childhood or in the family or how they were made to feel growing up. And my family never made me feel like that. The more I think about it, is I think that maybe it's something within my family that's come from generations before, that maybe there's other people in my family that feel the same way, and maybe none of us quite know where this has come from, but it's an integral feeling that some of us have, and not from anything external happening to us. And I think quite a lot of it for me may be centred around relationships and feeling that actually from my teen years onwards, that I wasn't good enough in those relationships, and when they ended, that was my fault. But actually, I think that sort of sense of rejection that you get when you're a teen, and particularly the way I'm wired with my impulsivity, I can have a bit of a fixed mindset on things, and I can very much, I absorb the emotions of people. I'm like a sponge, and That idea of not being good enough for people in relationships for me is particularly difficult for me to manage. So that was a difficult thing to kind of talk about. And then I suppose from that as well, I remember avoiding going around that for a little bit, but then opening up a lot about that. But yeah, I think you have to ask questions that make people think deeper about things and explore that, because you're not going to move on otherwise if you don't consider it.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on you talking then, because it could be interpreted as quite a therapeutic conversation that we had, and usually the intention in coaching with trying to explore this is to kind of backtrack a bit to help you see at what point you started to think like this, because often there's a moment, and if you can suddenly bring that into the open or shine a light on it, it can give you a really useful sense of perspective and a choice as to whether you continue to believe that or not. It's not supposed to be therapy, but it is supposed to just help give you some choice on your thinking going forward. So that question was provided by Jeff Ashton, because I asked my listeners if they had any questions they'd like me to ask guests. So thank you for answering that. The conversation has been really fascinating for me. Thank you, Sophie. I've really enjoyed spending time with you. I know my children were delighted to see you this morning when you turned up. It was like a celebrity was arriving. We're like, Sophie's coming.
Love your children. They're lovely. Yeah, no, it's been brilliant. Really Thank you for having me.
Thank you. As I listen back to this episode, a couple of things really strike me. The first is this idea of understanding ourselves better in order to learn more self-acceptance, because it can help us to stop comparing ourselves to others, to our peers or to our predecessors. And I love this question about what if no one's ever seen a leader like you? And the fact is that nobody will have done, because we are all unique. We have so many different attributes, skills, experience to bring to our roles, and that's what makes us powerful in what we do, if we can bring all of that to leadership. So I also just wanted to touch on a conversation towards the end about trying to understand where some of your traits come from, and how coaches, we tread a fine line between coaching and moving up against the boundary of counselling and therapy, and how it's really important that we stay in the right place around that. And Sophie mentioned the potential for blame, the potential for blaming others in our families for the way that we are, and actually perhaps there are just some traits that are built into us, and we just have to learn to accept that and manage that. So I found that really useful to think about that. So I hope you've enjoyed this series. We'll be back later this year, and I look forward to bringing you more episodes of the Lighting Fires podcast.